Well, hello and welcome to Agenda 21 Radio. This is the radio show that is stopping totalitarianism, one exceptional American at a time. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, are you that exceptional American? Well, of course you are. That's why you're listening to this radio show right here, right now on Agenda 21 Radio. Remember to visit our website, a21r.com, and of course, New California State, state of the future. And yeah, what a future you have here in New California State. A lot of things going on in Moss Landing out of Monterey. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit, but that's a big deal that's happening down there. Want to thank everybody for your participation in the New California State movement. It's been a wonderful experience. I know we're getting closer and closer and closer. We've written a lot of paperwork to the President of the United States. They've been very, very responsive to us, and we know that statehood is imminent, absolutely imminent. Now, some of the people that have been involved, I want to thank some of the people that have gone to Washington. I want to thank very much. Because it's been effective. We still need to go back. And with us right now, we have one of those people who went to Washington, and that's Simone Anderson. And Simone, welcome to Agenda 21 Radio. Again, you're home away from home.
Good morning, Paul.
Nice to see you. You're in your little redoubt at the park. Is that it?
I am in my readout at the park today, and literally there's broken telephone poles on my way down to town. The rivers are flooding. They're all over full right now. I don't know what they're doing with the water management. So we're having some pretty heavy storms here in Northern California. But here I'm at the river. Even the homeless people aren't here this morning.
Oh, boy. So is it raining there?
It's raining, windy, and the wind's been really high. Like I said, it broke a few telephone poles. I don't know if PG&E is out there yet, but looks like there's going to be outage in our area. I'm off grid, so I always have generators and solar, but my neighbors that live up the street are probably out of electricity this morning.
Right. It's nice to have a spare generator around in where we live in Northern California. It was interesting. I was in Calaveras County Saturday. We had a great time, had a great town hall and a great hearing up there, election hearing and so on. It was really, really interesting. And we went to Terry McBride's house, and Terry McBride's house is very off. It's not off grid, but it can be very easily. I mean, it's really isolated out there, and it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. She was burned out. She was in the Butte fire down there, and she was burned out, lost everything, and lived for 6 years in a trailer, she and her daughter, and stuck it out. And now that she just has this beautiful, beautiful home that she built herself finally. But the system of burning down with Cal Fire, huge scandal. We've known this, but she's lived the scandal, and that was one of the big findings in our hearing, and it all came out. And I'm sitting there thinking, we have a lot of problems to solve in the state of California, but with the globalist. And I know a few things about being a globalist, or of sorts, because you've trotted around the globe all so many times. So what do you have in store for us today? Because you always have such great knowledge.
Well, today I want to focus. Last night's meeting was really a great setup. Yesterday I woke up in the morning and Tiffany had just talked to me on Saturday about being on the show, and I'd been telling her about some of the things that are going on in China. And I'm probably one of the few people on your show. I've actually lived under communism and was in Venezuela when Chavez took over there, and they used the original Dominion machines to cheat in that election. They caused a mass flood that killed over 50,000 people several days before the election. So this is when I first became aware of weather modification. I'm trying to get my former father-in-law, Venezuelan, my son's father-in-law, I guess, a relative, to come on the show and talk about the demise of Venezuela and kind of compare it to a lot what's going on in the United States today. So I kind of wrote a little thing yesterday because one of my deep concerns is the fact that Western people have been brainwashed by communist propaganda. So I've just written a little thing so I can kind of express what I really mean and what my goal is to talk about today. And then I'm going to go into detail of some of the absolute atrocities that are being committed by the CCP in China today. So, as many of the world's people and their medias are distracted by the election of Donald Trump and the other populist leaders coming to power, the political and economic situations in most foreign nations continues to deteriorate. Russia, China, and the United States have moved away from a domestic consumption economy into a wartime economy. At the same time, the largest transfer of wealth continues from the masses to the wealthy worldwide. Many people are excited about the future promised by the new Western leaders, and others are devastated by the recent events. What worries me is that these distractions are preventing many of us from understanding what is going on under the surface in other countries whose autocratic leaders remain in power. And China is one of these places. You and I have discussed over the last few months that we are already at war with China, and California is one of the main battlefronts. Many Americans seem to have accepted the communist propaganda that China is a glorious utopia with a booming economy where there is no homeless and that the government cares for the people and offers them glowing future prospects. These misconceptions could not be further from the truth. The infiltration of our political structures, our media outlets, our corporations, and the general population's ignorance of communist systems is a major point for Westerners. Our ignorance of the true outcome of communist practices and goals are creating a blind spot for many people, especially those educated in US universities where communism, AKA social justice, is now a focus of our education. So today I'm going to continue exposing the real China and the atrocities they commit against their own people. These discussions are not an attack on the average Chinese person, nor a claim that America does not have problems that we need to solve too. They not only need our prayers, they need the West to stop promoting the system and turning a blind eye to the human tragedy that is occurring in China today. According to a recent report in China, over 500 million people feel there is no hope for the future, and many have just given up. This is a serious number as China appears to have only about 800 million people and not the 1.4 billion people they claim. Young people can no longer afford to marry or have children, leading to the Bailan movement, which it translates to lie flat. The average Chinese work week is 76 hours, and people are still struggling. People are expected to marry young so they can have children and support their parents. Since there are few pensions and no social services or medical care for the elderly, the parents retire and move in with the young working couple and care for the child while the children support them. This is especially difficult for women because they're expected to not only bear the children, but work a 76-hour work week. What is going to happen to the largest Asian population in the world when the younger generations stop having children like it's occurring in China? Is there a mass starvation and homelessness event in China's future? China's economy offers no jobs for college graduates whose parents spent their life savings to send them to school. The housing market has collapsed. These people have been living under a pressure cooker for generations. People are exploding and acting out in mass demonstrations, burning down their own factories, and refusing to participate in society. You can literally go on Chinese social media and see people sobbing. There are whole streets of people crying after the factories are closing. This declining situation is very dangerous for the rest of the world. And what people really need to understand is that the system is being pushed by the New World Order, many of our public figures in education, and our corporations. China has been the practice run, and now they plan to implement the system worldwide. Remember, first they have to collapse the existing structures and destroy any hope for the future to force humanity to accept the one world government and religion. Sometimes this situation reminds me of what happened to Germany between World War I and World War II, where the punitive reparations paid by the Germans broke the society. And this really is what facilitated the Nazi, as in the Second World War movement. Pushing people to the limits for their entire lives is bound to bring about some brutal and destructive outcomes. This is the precipice that the world finds itself standing on right now. And this is what I feel is really going on today, and that most of the people are unaware of really how scary and how we're just on the verge And as you and I have, Paul, have discussed, we're not on the verge. We are in World War III. So today I wanted to talk about the realities of communism and the absolute control they have over their populations. For instance, using asylums to punish and torture people. This is a big story I'm going to cover today. And the one-child policy has created severe male to female ratios. And the control methods of the deep state operatives include public employees harassing people to have children and threatening them with the social credit system if they don't go out immediately that week and start to produce 5 children each. So these are some of the topics I'm going to focus on today. Did you have any comment on my little...
Yeah, that's wonderful, because you were prompted by last night's discussion and the public call that we had for New California State that Frank Warren, the chair and senator from Sonoma County, brought out. Frank's a military man and has great expertise in chemical warfare. And in fact, you heard his comments about where he's been before and what he's done. And he was very concerned about what was going on at Moss Landing down there. And again, the strategery, and he called California a battlefield. And he looked at it as a battlefield, which I think is what you're saying here. California is the battlefield right now. And we know that. And like no other place in the United States, even though the United States is the battlefield, it has been a battlefield for some time, but people are just putting their, not really thinking that that's any kind of battlefield. And we're still very, very secure as a country, and we're not. We're really, there's some evil things that are happening all around us. And the problem is that we have the situation with he just scoped it out. He says, we've got fires, we've got floods, we've got, the Moss Landing. And then all of a sudden, just on Saturday, we had the Shell refinery in the Bay Area blew up, So one thing after another is just leading to, now we have storms, we have floods, we have disasters around us. We have the threat of the Oroville Dam. We've got a lot of things there. But that's just the minimal stuff here in California. It's also been out in the nation. But you're absolutely right to point it out that we are in this battle, and this is the battlefield of California. And we have to look at it like he does. He says, these things are just not random things that happen. You had an airplane crash in Alaska a week ago, Friday. Then you had the air crash on Saturday. And then, I guess that was Friday, whatever day that was, Monday, I guess it was. And then we had another air crash again in Philadelphia. And he says, these things are just not random acts. These things are all things designed to tear us down and destroy us.
I actually wrote this essay when I woke up yesterday morning. And then when I heard what you guys were talking about last week, we were on the same page. And I know that a lot of people don't understand why I keep going at China. And one of the reasons I'm not, I have a huge group of Asian friends from Japan to Malaysia, right? So it's not anything against the Asian people themselves. They've been exploited the most. And what I said in my closing of that statement is the system that they've implemented on these people is what they're planning on implementing on all of us. They've just been the test run. And the more we stand by and watch it, the closer they get to them implementing a system on us. So we are at war. We have been at war. And if you look at China, none of things are reported. I watch a lot of people who sneak videos out of China, dissident type people, and China is blowing up. There's blowing up every day. There's not only they've gone around and built this infrastructure all over the world. You can go and there's entire channels that just cover all the buildings that are collapsing in China, the bridges that are collapsing. The communists do not service anything. There's this big scandal going on in China right now because people keep stepping into elevators and falling down the shaft. They've supposedly been serviced, and they found they don't maintain anything. Everything is about cutting corners and about how things look and not how things really are. And so they've had all these like escalators where they just start breaking up and the people are crushed underneath. People are falling down airline shafts. And of course, they always say no one died in any of these. They've had massive explosions. They've had flooding. They've had earthquakes. They're under fire in the same situation we are. And we're being turned against each other. But what's really scary is the Chinese people have been pushed to the edge. And unlike a lot of other nations, the Chinese people really hate other foreigners because their government favors foreigners over their population. And you've seen just in Australia last week where a Chinese national was denied his visa and he was going to be sent back to China from Australia. He poured a thermos of hot water on a baby and scalded it for life. They just... in Switzerland a few weeks ago, they had a stabbing of 3 small children. All over China, the men have been completely humiliated in this society. In the rural areas, there's 10 men for every woman. And the government literally forces them, brings women in and forces them to have sex to procreate. I mean, they have menstruation police in China right now. A lot of people aren't aware of the one child, or I guess some people are aware of the one child
policy
that was in China. Well, now I couldn't find the video. I wanted to send it to you today, but now the same people who were in charge. So if you wanted to have more than one child in China, there was literally the family planning ministry, and they were in every city. And when they would track women's menstruation. And when they were found to be pregnant with a female, this was a technology that Bill Gates implemented, his partner in China. The watches would indicate when the women were ovulating. If the child was a female child, she would be brought to an abortion clinic and forcibly aborted the children. But there were a lot of people, especially rural people, that wanted to have more than one child. So what they would do when they did do that is they would go out, they would take the roof off their house in the middle of winter and take all their livestock so the people would starve to death, basically. And there were literally underground tunnel systems that people hid in and lived in so they could have their own children. So this same ministry's use has been converted, and they're now in every town. They call all the young women, ask them when they're menstruating, and tell them that it's their duty to produce 5 children. And now the same people are going into the businesses of all the young men and that. And they're telling them immediately they need to go out and get married and have 5 children. And the people are saying we can't even feed ourselves. And the government says that's your problem. It's your duty. If you do not go out and have 5 children right now, the social credit score they're trying to implement here in the United States via the United Nations, he will lose his credit. He won't be able to travel. He won't be able to go anywhere unless he goes out and produces 5 children. And he says to them, you're making everything robotic. Where are my children going to work? And they start confronting. And these are viral videos going all over China right now. So for all those people who think communism is so wonderful and they really care, they basically are undergoing forced pregnancies. This communism is the worst on women. It's hard on men, but it's the worst on women because women are supposed to be equal. So they're expected to work the same hours as men. They're also expected to produce the children. They have what they call the dowry system. So Chinese men, their family pays the bride's family because basically she's going to be a slave. She's not only going to work to support his parents who live with them, she is also going to be expected to produce 5 children in the same system. So this is some really crazy stuff that's going on. I don't know if people understand that this is
they don't. A couple of things you don't understand. They don't understand China until you start understanding, how they have their own kingdoms. They have their own empires that they've built, and when the empire collapses, which is what we're seeing right now, there's almost always a purge or a killing that goes on. And we're starting to see that now. This is the first signs of it. The economy has completely collapsed. Our own Chris Street came through and really explained that to everybody about how China works and how it functions for over the years. And we've been kind of watching it unfold. And he's been to China several times. He's consulted with the government several times. And he's talked about the relationship with Saudi Arabia to China and all this other stuff, and worked with their Supreme Court, oddly enough. And it's interesting now because these events are actually taking place. But to exacerbate that, that was the one-child policy. And now, but being a biologist, understanding population dynamics, that was just really a bad idea. But now they're suffering for it. And of course, the idea behind that was that there would only be one family. They were trying to do population control, like the Greens say to do, right? So they say there's only going to be one child that can be, you can only have one child per couple. And so what did they do? They selected against the female because the female is not as important as the male in their opinion. So now they did this for years, 20 years, and now there's a deficiency in what? Females. Hello.
Okay, well, I have a whole different view of this situation. I agree with what you just said, but I believe that they have planned any time in history where there's more men, there's women, there's war. So I think the people who control the planet hate the Chinese. And I did a lot of research, and what I'm understanding, if you understand where the different groups of people come from Noah's line, right? From Noah, he had 3 sons, Japheth, Ham, and Shem. So Japheth is the father of the Turks and the Asians. And that's who, his wife had the almond eyes. So I believe if you understand matriarchal lines, where the true and the oldest lines in history are the female line, we concentrate on the male line. I believe they're trying to wipe out the line of Japheth's wife. If you understand these ancient battles that these groups of people have,
let's for a second here. You had the Silk Road. That was the Chinese Silk Road, not the Belt and Road that we have today, which is equivalent. And again, their one-child policy was in preparation for something, as you're saying.
For war.
That's really what it was.
For war.
For war.
Yes.
And here we are. They've set it up for war. And in fact, they've embedded in California and in other places of the United States, because we've been counting them, all these military-aged men. Interesting. And it's not just a little bit.
They hate us.
And they absolutely, they hate us. And this is something that a lot of people, you painted the picture. They think that we appreciate their utopia. We want their utopia. All of our executives look that way. They envy the government of China as to how they can get so much work and productivity out of the Chinese people. Well, it doesn't.
Well, true. Right? President of Prime Minister of Canada loves the Chinese. He's got quotes. Yep. He just admires how they can use the authoritarian hand, because he himself is a communist. I know we're short on time. This is the one story I wanted to cover, and I wanted to explain to people what's really going on in China. They're having a massive. The government itself says that 1 out of 3 Chinese people is suffering from mental health issues. You have to understand that mental health in China is not looked at in the same way. So there's been this young girl, Miss Li. She was a young pink, the little pinks, and they were basically the little communists. She had a dispute. She's extremely brilliant. This story's gone viral. Insane asylums are used to put in dissidents. A lot of them are full of Uyghurs and the other persecuted groups. But basically, the Chinese they think you're crazy if they're beating you and they say to you, is 2 + 2 4? And you say, yes, 2 + 2 is 4. And they'll beat you until you say 2 + 2 is 5. And they think you're crazy for answering 4. So you have to understand, this came straight out of the Bolshevik Khrushchev. The Russians were removed from the World Psychiatric Association because they were implementing this stuff in the prisons of Khrushchev. So this woman, Miss Li, had a dispute. She went to her local people. They picked her up. They tortured her. She was in prison. She went to court. She fought herself in court. They kept picking her up and putting her back in jail. She's now been lobotomized. Okay, this is China. This is what This is what all my liberal friends want for us. Okay. This is really, really upsetting me. I have a Turkish friend. We go round and round. He's always sending me all these things. And basically, most people just say, well, China's giving us money, so they must be good. Well, look at their crap that they're building. All these countries in Africa who've accepted Chinese money to build these dams that are probably going to collapse in the next few years. But they already have all their money and they've confiscated all their land and they're defaulting on the loans to pay for the power stations. And this is again with the Belt and Road Initiative. They went to all these countries. They promised them stuff. The people defaulted on it, just like the state of California is defaulted on the illegal loans that Gavin Newsom and Jerry Brown and governors in Washington, Oregon, and Hawaii took from the Chinese. And they are allowed, just like any people, when you get someone evicted from a house and they won't leave, you can call the police and they can forcibly evict them. That's exactly what's going on right now in California. They've pledged the federal and state lands for loans they can't repay. In California alone, between the federal and state government, they own like 100 million acres. And if you notice where the fires are, it's predominantly on state and federal land, and where the underground high-speed train has existed since the 90s and is being used for nefarious reasons like human trafficking, drug trafficking, and just the second system that the elite live in while us peasants suffer here in the real world.
So when you take a look at California, you talk about the burned areas, and we've all done this, but you're now looking at the battlefield of California, because to me the fire areas are scorched earth, which means that's the target to destroy, just like a building, and they're destroying much of California that's viable and usable for the people, just to get to the elements, which is what the rare earth elements, gold, water, whatever resource they want to have and they want to capture. So their calling card is, we're here and we're going to take it back. And I think that we've been on the position of the New California state side, and we explain this. You can see this in grievance number 95, chapter 2, the 190th grievance. We explain all this, that we're not taking this, and that this is our land, this is our country, this is our sovereign state. So that's clashing with the Chinese, that whole thing. And again, it's interesting because the church, the Catholic Church, tells people, don't listen to New California.
Well, you know why? Because they are the ones who created communism. Okay? I mean, I don't think you've ever looked at my report. The Catholic Church, communism, what were they doing in Europe when all of our relatives left? They were murdering everyone who would not consent to the one world government, one world religion, and one world military of the Pope and the Roman Empire.
That's right.
So I can directly link communism, and this is one of my serious problems with Ronald Reagan, although, I grew up in the Reagan area and was inspired to go to Russia, actually because of Ronald Reagan. But in retrospect, the Pope financed the Nazis. And if you don't think he did, then why don't you go to the Vatican and look at all the stuff? Who ends up with the stuff in the war? That tells you who financed the war. It was the Vatican. And to point about, if you look at the United Nations documents and they talk about the one world order ruled by Lucifer, the Vatican means divine serpent. Okay. So these people, if you look at the New World Order, the leader of the New World Order is going to be the Pope. And he's going to bring about the rule of Lucifer on the planet. That's right. If you want to read the Lucifer Trust, the document that the United Nations is based on, the channeled writings of Alice Gould Bailey. She was getting channeled writings because she was a witch from people like Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley. So these people are warlocks, they're Satanists. That's why we have all of the abominations being implemented into our government. And the trans movement is part of it because Lucifer was a male-female entity. We see that today. The word Lucifer was the planet Venus in the Roman spectrum or the Greek spectrum. And and it was Venus was Lucifer before, the son of the morning, because it's the first sun in the morning and the last star you can see at night. So we really have to understand what's going on. And communism is a Catholic concept. It is the replacement of the Roman Empire when the whole world lived under the slavery of the Romans and their military force.
Well, one of the things that we've studied and talked about here is, what happened after World War II, and of course the Nazis and the rat line with the Catholic Church involvement in that, and of course Peter Levenda's book called The Rat Line. We based a lot of that, but I actually traveled to Germany to study the collapse of communism there, but also discovered communism in the Catholic Church. That was way back in 1992. They're the ones behind all this. And this is what we've been touting ever since on this radio show. So much so that we celebrated those people who came over here to the United States under the guise of Martin Luther, because he was an antidote to all that. And in fact, we founded New California, on the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther putting up the 95 Theses on the door in Wittenberg. And then on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, we celebrated Martin Luther again by giving up our Declaration of Independence for New California State. So the Catholic Church knows us by those numbers. They know that what we stand for is not what they stand for. And communism is the key to it. And again, if you've ever traveled to a communist country or former communist country like you, and you've lived under communism, you get it right away. You see the parallel. I mean, it's so stunning and so different from where we are here, even today with all this. But you see very easily what they're doing to destroy us, I think. And it's not too far from reality for me anyway. There certainly wasn't in '92, and it's even more so now, seeing all this stuff manifest itself, and especially in China, watching China collapse as we've been seeing it. I did a whole thing on this morning about Xi Jinping and how Gavin Newsom cleaned the streets and all that stuff, because clearly California feels like we have to pay off that debt to China. Because not only was California looking around for government loans to stay afloat from the United States and getting $97 billion in 2001, which interrupted statehood for New California, by the way, by getting rid of Donald Trump and not having him be the truly elected president, which he was. But also, we found out all the other loans that have been provided to Gavin Newsom to keep the state afloat from China, and then from Saudi Arabia. And of course, we've been finding out that Gavin Newsom has been defaulting on those loans. And Saudi Arabia is absolutely furious about this, because they were giving money to China to give to California. Now they want their money back. So, and guess what? From our perspective in New California, that ain't happening.
Well, what people have to understand is the reason our ancestors left Europe, because the Inquisition went on for several hundred years. And here in California, we have St. Ignatius. He murdered they say they murdered over 111 million people in the Inquisition. So why did our relatives, people seem to forget all this, and they had to come capture America because everybody who could get away got away. I mean, the brain drain on Europe has been incredible, because people have been leaving Europe for a long time. And it's the same thing that's going on with China. People are leaving in mass. And it's super suspicious to me that the super wealthy get to leave with all their money, but then they hold the small business guys there in China. So
only the elite are here.
Excuse me?
Only the elite come here.
Well, right. And so they're the communists who killed everybody. So you don't think they're going to come here and try to do it here with us, with all their money?
Yeah. See, that people in America don't equate communism to wealth at all.
No, well, communism is about stealing everyone has.
That's right.
Slavery on the masses. And that's what I'm trying to explain. Here's another crazy story that's going on in China right now. So they had the forced vaccinations. Okay. So
right.
A lot of people, you could watch if you wanted to. I watched one guy who does satellites. They had incineration. One of the big things is that people in China don't believe that the government gave them the real death tolls, that there was millions and millions and millions of people who died. And so now in China, the hospitals and the crematoriums are full of dead children, right in Wuhan area, right? Because they were forced to take the vaccination, and they have children dying of respiratory infections. They say it's
cardiac problems.
The cardiac problems. They have small children dying of heart attacks right now all over China. So they're covering it up. You can see from the air that they've got mass incineration units that have moved into cities, just like they did during COVID. They're destroying the evidence. They're probably also killing the dissidents there that they're trying to deal with. So there's probably several levels of the murder that's going on.
This is what goes on when you see the regime change. The last time this happened was with Mao in 47. And by 1950, he's starting out people. And there's long pictures. In fact, you mentioned pictures. The very first time I ever understood the problem in China was about 1975 or 6, somewhere around that range. I was being shown some pictures, and they were satellite pictures, I thought, but they weren't satellite pictures. They're actually pictures from U-2 planes. They were overflying parts of China, and it was during Mao's regime in which everybody was murdered and killed and starved, and people were marching or taking as refugees strung out along a big long road, and they started looking closer along the side of the road, and they saw bodies, and I said, "What is this?" And they explained it to me, and it was a picture from a U-2. It was a very classified picture at the time. I didn't know it was classified, but that's what they're doing here. And you know, they did it a little bit differently there, but now they've broken out crematoriums, which we've heard about, and you bring it to light here. That's the reason why, because the COVID shots that they've been administering, which, by the way, are killing off the babies and kids first.
Well, right, because they can't, there's no jobs. Is the young people are yelling back at the people that are coming to their offices telling them that have children. There's a massive, there's what they call youth retirement homes now. And this is basically the entire populations of children who've given up, who've gone to the country, and they're living in basic communes. They don't have sex. They don't have relationships. They sing music and drink tea and meditate because they have nothing to live for and they have no future. So this is a huge population. I always hear from my one Turkish friend, Matthew. He loves every communist thing that's ever been thought up. He doesn't think he does. He's actually an intelligent person, but he's been indoctrinated for years. Right. Stuff. And he thinks he's being compassionate and say, oh, you know, America does this or America does that. I'm like, really? Is your daughter have someone knocking on her door this morning, forcing her to get impregnated and then breed 5 children she's not going to be able to feed? Are you telling me that's what's going on down in Irvine right now where your daughter lives? No, that's not what's going on. So there's massive homelessness. There's also these things called student hotels. Mm-hmm. Because there's so much pressure to get education and move from the rural areas, again, where they're destroying the farm areas through pollution, terrible water. They hate the farmers. There's a big discrepancy. It's kind of like, I mean, you think the arguments between LA and the rural areas of California is big. Wait till you hear the arguments that these people are having with the farmers. And so the hotels are kind of like, they almost look like train compartments, and they're just like beds with a curtain, and they're literally places because children are ashamed to go home and admit to their family. They only could, the graduates in college of the last 17 years, there's been a 17% placement. So some people are deciding to go forward and get a doctorate because they don't know what else to do, because if they get a doctorate, they feel like they might be able to find something. But these children are living in the cities in these things because they're ashamed to go home to their families because there is no social support network, right? The system is you get married, your parents move in with you, you support them in their old age. Well, there's no one to support. They have the largest aging population in the world. I believe we're heading into a mass starvation event, just like you described, because the CCP would rather kill everybody in China, take everything they have, and then do that to the rest of us. So that's really what the long-term goal is. And I just, And the fact the Chinese hate the foreigners, because the Chinese CCP, like they have, because they're trying to get all the reserves and stuff in the African countries and trying to turn the African countries communist for years. When African students come into go to school in China or whatever, they're given comfort women, they're given mistresses, they're giving premium housing, it's kind of the same thing that's going on in the United States. What I kind of want to parallel my whole conversation to is people don't understand that this is the same thing that's going on in the United States. The Chinese people are being sold out. All of their savings, all of their money, all of their taxes are going to foreign countries and foreign people. So it's the Chinese people are feeling about the Westerners the same way the Westerners are feeling about all the third world people coming to their country and getting free housing and free, you see, because we're controlled by the same bankers worldwide. China is controlled by the city of London. Who gave the communists all the money to kill all the people? This is what people have to understand. Poor people don't have money to buy machine guns and build armies. They get it from the bankers of the West, from the city of London and from New York City. This is where they get the money to do all these dastardly deeds. So we have to understand the connection, and what they're doing in China is a preview of what they plan on doing here. These people have openly discussed it for years. They're implementing the plan, and we're in the battle. And this is what I think that so many people just go watch the Kardashians. You know, I mean, there's so many people that even as they're looking this in the face, they're still choosing their selfish ways. And this is something that people just have to wake up. Right now, they're having all these revenge murders in China because Chinese men feel so frustrated because no matter what they do, so what they're doing is they're going out, like we've had these things where we had the Muslim terrorists, angry with whatever was going on, mow down a group of people in New Orleans. This is going on all over China, but in China, it's geared towards killing the children because the children are the future, and you destroy a family if they lose their children, because that means the parents are going to starve to death and be homeless because there are no social structure systems. And even if they was, the company, just like our country that's bankrupt from these kinds of things, even if they're promised these things, they're not there. Pensions are never paid to the average person in China. The only people, just like here in the United States and the Western European nations, the only people that are doing well are members of the political class and the medical industry. Those are the two industries worldwide.
The medical industry.
And the military industrial complex.
Yeah, it's so well said here, Simone, and I'm really happy that you're breaking this news to everybody. But again, reiterating it and doing it so clearly and so poignantly right now, because no matter how long we get up and scream, I've been doing this show screaming about this for 15 years, and before that, I was doing 15 years on local origination TV and other radio, but not and so as intense as Agenda 21 radio. But we need to have this wake-up call right now. We need that kind of slap in the face going, hey, wake up, America. We are unique. We are special. And right now we have Donald Trump, who's come around, and he's all of a sudden turning some things very quickly. I have never seen a president move so quickly in the last 2 weeks as he's moved right now. We just got done securing, guess where? The Panama Canal. And we were asked in New California to participate. We were asked to participate in an economic program that features the Panama Canal. And I'm going, really? Yeah, not only Panama Canal, but the ports of New California, Panama Canal, ports in Texas, ports in Miami, an economic zone that's going to explode. He is acting so quickly because he understands what you're talking about. He understands what's happening in China. He understands the dynamics of the world, and he sees them. He sees them so clearly.
Do you understand why that we have the ports that we have? A lot of people believe we won the War of 1812. You can go directly to the fort that fought the battle and see that we actually lost the War of 1812. They closed all private ports and they opened ports owned by the City of London Federal Reserve System. So the ports that we see, like the Port of Long Beach and all these major ports, are possessions of the private City of London. They're not our ports. If you understand that the Chinese have, I don't know if you just saw that big story, the way the Chinese are getting around the embargoes, and you and I have discussed how they tried to take over the Port of Long Beach. They were denied, but they did it anyways through shell companies. And there's just one company this last week that was busted. Basically, they're taking ships, Chinese ship containers. The truck drivers are taking them to an off-the-port facility. They have these special locks that they're not supposed to be able to get into. These, electric kind of locks things. They go there, they take out the stuff, they deliver it, and then they bring it back with other stuff that's much cheaper. And that one operation was $200 million. So as I said, the Port of Long Beach is a military operation. And I believe that we are already infiltrated there for the last several years. And a lot of what we see going on, as I've mentioned before, there's a large underground military base right in that area that goes all the way to Las Vegas. It's the submarine systems and the underground water system.
So who's in charge physically of those bases right now?
I don't know.
London or the United States? Or you don't know?
Due to the fact that we're having all this warfare, I'd have to say the City of London. We're in a struggle between the private corporation that went bankrupt several years ago and is still trying to claim its assets. And
right.
Again, and if you understand the opium wars in China, what did they end up doing? They forced the Chinese to take the British banking system. And a lot of people don't believe we all live in the Admiralty law system when we're not. The countries, the 7 countries that are not in the system, Iraq and North Korea and a couple other countries, we've been at war with them for 20 years, trying to force them, loaning them money they could never repay or after we destroyed their countries via war, right? Mm-hmm. So there was no nuclear weapons in Iraq. They wanted Saddam Hussein. You can see people who were military officers. Oh, yeah. Time, and they're just like, why are we going to war with Iraq? No one in the military understood. And usually, the guys in the military would understand if we were on some war with somebody.
That wasn't the case.
Now, a lot of people
you got 30 seconds. You got 30 seconds.
Okay, so my name's Simone M. Anderson at AOL.com. I have a show called The Lost in Translation Show on Rumble, so please tune in there. And I'll see you again, Paul. Thanks for your listeners. I hope this helped people understand. I know I'm kind of a little animated today.
That's good.
It's early in the morning, and this is really scary stuff. So I hope it opens people's eyes.
Simone, thank you very much. And it's really been very helpful for the audience and for many more people that are going to watch this, the thousands more that will watch, because this is an important time in American history. And all of us play a big role. And of course, we all know New California is playing a big role. And we understand this now a little bit more clearly. Thank you very much, Simone.
You're
Simone
welcome.
Anderson, Lost in Translations here on Agenda 21 Radio. We have to run for time. I want to thank you all very much for being with us. Remember to visit our website, newcaliforniastate.com, newcaliforniastate.com. Remember, stay strong, America. We are exceptional American.